Un aplauso para Edward, y lo recibimos aquí en el escenario.
Gracias.
Nice to meet you.
Todo suyo.
Gracias por el recibimiento. Quiero empezar contestando la pregunta más importante que ustedes tienen. Who the hell is this British guy, and what is he doing at a conference about the bioeconomy in Argentina? The truth is, I'm here because I really believe in a global bioeconomy. And I've worked in many, many different forms of biotechnology, bioeconomy, nature conservation, biosecurity when it comes to threats that emanate from biotechnology. And I've also worked in different aspects of the biotechnology tool chain, software, wetware, molecular biology. And I've worked in many, many different organizations, past and present. And I think it's fair to say that you could call me un chucho, but I think I bring a lot of diversity to all the different things that a bioeconomy needs. And I'm not here today because I want to sell you something. I'm actually here because I want to share with you all of the lessons that I've learned trying to build companies and projects in the bioeconomy over the last 10 years. I want to share with you some of the lessons that I've learned about the mistakes that I've made. But most importantly, I'm here to learn more about Argentina. And I'm going to spend the next couple of months here, so this has been a really great experience so far, and I'm looking forward to learning more about what an Argentinian bioeconomy will look like. So I wanted to start by sharing how I think about the bioeconomy and why we need startups and companies and entrepreneurs to get there. So I think everyone in the room will agree with the standard explanation. The bioeconomy is an economic system where we derive the goods from biological sources. And I think this is fine, this is non-controversial. But I like to think about this more through layers. And the next one, really, to me, is that the bioeconomy is an opportunity to pay back into ecological services that sustain human systems. Because if we're not able to do that in a successful manner in the next few decades, then the biological systems and the ecological systems that sustain all human activity are going to continue to deteriorate along with the climate and with natural biodiversity. So the summary of these lessons that I want to share with you is that I think the bioeconomy needs to have a profit incentive tied to a regenerative outcome for the planet. Because I think that's the best way that you can tie existing profit incentives for business and scalability with planetary regeneration. I also feel like we need to think quite critically about the different systems that we use to build companies, particularly because the bioeconomy is multidisciplinary. We can't really afford to let companies fail at the rate they do in the world of startups when it comes to trying to keep biological and ecological systems prosperous. And it's hard to make a startup, but it's really hard to make a high-tech, science-based startup. And then finally, the lesson that I wanted to share is that one needs to have an appreciation for the localities of the problems that you're trying to solve in the environment. When we think about a global bioeconomy, we often think about, let's try and make a company that scales across the entire planet, which is what venture capital wants. But that doesn't really work if you're trying to solve a problem that exists in a particular locality and a particular ecosystem. So, when Desktop Genetics was sold, that was the first company I was involved in, I had watched a documentary called Chasing Coral, which spoke about the threat to coral reefs. And as a diver, I was horrified. I thought, how can we lose coral reefs? They're so fantastic. So I went to the International Coral Reef Symposium, which happened to be happening in the UK, even though we don't have any corals. And I said, hi, I'm an exited biotechnology entrepreneur. I know all about genome engineering and CRISPR and genomics. How can I help save the corals. And that led to me consulting with projects in the United States and Australia. So you might not know, but corals are really amazing in terms of the value that they provide. They cover only 1% of Earth's surface, but they provide, on an annual basis, $10 trillion a year in terms of tourism, fishing, coastal defense. They're home to almost a quarter of the total fish that are caught, and a huge diversity of species. They're essentially the rainforests of the sea. But unfortunately, they're horribly threatened, and it looks like we'll lose maybe 90% of them by 2050 due to this effect called coral bleaching. Corals are composite organisms of animals with algae living inside of them. And the animal polyp hosts these photosynthetic algae. And they're pretty much accustomed to work at a particular temperature. And if that temperature changes, the coral will expel the photosynthetic algae, saying, oh, no, you're not good enough for me, I need something else that can handle the heat. And when this bleaching event occurs, it's normally reversible with the new algae coming in that are more tolerant and can keep the photosynthesis going. But if the coral sustains too much heat for too long, as coral reefs are experiencing today, that bleaching lasts for an incredibly long time, and the coral gets permanently bleached and dies. And you can see this effect here, where we have a healthy coral reef on the left, and that same reef just a few months later undergoing a bleaching event. And most of these corals will end up dead. And that's a problem, because when it does happen, the ocean pulverizes their skeletons, turning them into rubble, which then become essentially weapons to all the surviving corals. So this is the threat that coral reefs face, and what a lot of coral reef scientists are trying to stop. So after working in this area for about 8 months, I ended up proposing a project that would look at breeding corals that could be resistant to climate change. And the way that this would happen would be an initial set of sampling activities that would find survivor corals, where we could sequence the genomes of those organisms and find out what genes could be responsible for keeping them alive. Those corals would also be taken and put in tanks in aquariums, where they would be exposed to light and temperature conditions for a very long time that would keep them going or replicate the natural environment that the corals experience so that they were happy. And happy corals produce sperm and eggs. And if you have that, you can create single-celled coral larvae, and then you can put them into a genome editing pipeline, and you can manipulate the genes that you see are potentially associated with thermal resilience. And after that, once you've done your genetic studies and you've done the modification, you can then go back to the wild corals, reselect them, and then engage in a targeted breeding program, just as you would with crops or other species. And I stress this was not about releasing genetically engineered corals into the wild, but just doing targeted breeding. Now, the problem with this is that, well, there's actually a lot of problems. When I showed up at the conference and I talked about biotechnology and genomics, all the coral scientists were ecologists saying, we don't have any molecular tools. Like, this isn't model organism work. This isn't crops or humans or mice. This is novel. So I ended up essentially proposing very long projects that had a lot of interdependencies on them that would take a very long time. Even to get started, we'd have to build up software, wetware, hardware, laboratories, aquariums, genetic modification systems for corals that had never been done, and it could take at least $20 million and at least 5 years, which seemed to me to be worth it for something that was giving $10 trillion of return per year. But conservation groups, which are generally conservative, said, no, we don't have that kind of money. That seems kind of crazy to us. And then I thought, well, what if you turn this into a business? And the trouble is, there's no existing business model to keep corals alive today. This is a tragedy of the commons. Fishermen don't pay for corals. Coastal defense government services don't pay for corals. It's free. And so without a market or a profit incentive, how could you build a company? And it's not just corals that have this problem. These kinds of ecosystem services, where nature is providing something for free, and we have a lot of different things that come from nature for free, are really under threat by different businesses that are sort of harvesting them endlessly and don't have an obvious motive to put money back into that because it will just be seen as a line item of expenses. And this is quite challenging because if we lose any of these things, it's going to be a problem for critical systems like agriculture. And when it comes to agriculture, it's clear that the entire system, more or less, is built on removing as much value out of nature as possible and converting natural systems into farms. We are essentially living on planet farm. If you had a position as Earth manager and your boss said, hey, how's it going? And you told them that you were degrading possibly up to $450 trillion of value that come from natural ecosystems in exchange for just $12 trillion of value in agriculture alone, they'd probably say, what are you doing? Right? You need to figure this out pretty quickly. So I started to think, well, how do we figure that out? And how do we take existing systems that our economy is built on and transfer that into ecosystem protection? So at this point, I decided to leave corals alone. I thought maybe I'll come back to that in a while. People will see that there is actually a business model. And I joined a venture building firm in London called Deep Science Ventures. And they'd heard what I was doing in coral, and they said, do you want to do agriculture startups and build them for us? And I said, as long as we can do this and execute this thesis, I'm interested. Let's do it. So the idea is let's build startups that can create positive feedback loops between nature and agriculture. If you can deploy a company and a technology that's paying into nature whilst increasing yield for farmers without necessarily saying, like, we're doing regenerative agriculture where farmers are going to go, I don't know about that, that's kind of an ideology. What if we could just build products, service, and technologies that improved yields, that farmers wanted, that were also good for nature? And these are some of the 4 initial lines of thinking that I had taken. The thesis has got way more complex than this since then. Now, the challenge with building technology startups, because we need to use a lot of different technologies, a lot of different technical domains to do this, is the science entrepreneurship process kind of sucks. It's old. You have a lot of different technical people working in their discipline. Biologists are oftentimes just that. They don't really speak to the chemists or the engineers. They're probably not speaking to the business people. You also have a strong focus on intellectual property in university systems that are responsible for creating this knowledge. And universities have tech transfer groups that don't really want to license intellectual property without saying, is this a good deal for us? And that means that entrepreneurs that might want to start a company have to do it on bad terms. In the UK, the terms aren't great. In some countries, they're better. But that's pretty suboptimal. The third thing is you have very bureaucratic systems where academic science and knowledge is generated in these very, very long pipelines where scientists want to keep working on that in a sort of secure role at a university. There isn't a strong incentive to jump out of a bureaucratic system and take a risk and do something new. And oftentimes, coming back to sort of the focus that scientists have, the biologists want to solve a problem with biology. The chemists want to solve the problem with chemistry. And because of that, the system makes people specialize in ways that may mean that they miss more obvious solutions that the market is actually hungry for. And so you can almost say it's a silver bullet or a magic solution. But really, it's probably a combination of many different things that you need to test. And what I liked about DSV is it provided a solution to a problem that I faced as an entrepreneur, where I started a company and I had no idea what I was doing. It was literally like, who wants to start a company with me in biotech? And those were my co-founders, and we had to bootstrap for a while, and we started the company, and we were raising money, and we were just trying to make it up as we went along. We got lucky because CRISPR happened, and we piled into CRISPR very aggressively, which worked. But for many companies, they have to sort of find their way through slowly, and it's expensive if they don't know what they're doing from day one. So this venture builder I joined provides a space for entrepreneurs to do that with a team of experienced people around them saying, okay, we've done some research, what do you think? You're an expert. And they create a company up to a year before it even gets incorporated. Very agile team, multidisciplinary, collaborative. It's focused on outcomes rather than saying, let's push this technology into the market. Instead, it says, what's the problem the market has? And how do we solve that? And how do we amplify that? And let's be really critical about the technologies we use and who we put on that team. So the process takes place over up to 18 months. We think about this in a sector level. I work in the agriculture team. We form relationships with partners that understand the sector and the planetary problems very well. And then we identify these areas of opportunity, which are clusters of problems and solutions and possible technologies that we could throw together. An example that we have on right now is called high-impact agricultural transplantation. How do we take agriculture out of areas of high biodiversity and put them into degraded lands? And what technologies will we use? And once we have a thesis, internally in our team, we hire a special position called a founding analyst. And this is an entrepreneurial scientist who doesn't want to be in academia, but they don't know what company they want to start. And we say, okay, you're a specialist in this kind of thing. Take all of our research and tell us why we're wrong, and we're going to help you build a company. And as they develop their own ideas, they combine it with us, our ideas. They then get to the point where they say, listen, I know the next constraint is I'm a biologist. I need a machine learning expert. So we'll hire a machine learning expert and create the team progressively. And then as they get to their bottlenecks, we will then put them in touch with universities where they have advisors or academics who specialize in those areas. And we say to the advisors, wouldn't it be great if you had an agile team that wanted to create a company about something that you know about that you don't have time to work on, that will also give you equity in that company. And so we bring all of these people together. And then we're able to launch a company because they've gone out to the market, they've got some initial contracts signed with customers, and they've gone to lawyers and been able to say they have intellectual property and freedom to operate, and this looks like a very exciting company. And then finally, we're able to say to investors, hey, we have a team that's going to solve this problem. It's custom built. The IP looks good. They've already got customers. They've got a line into universities with the facilities and the expertise to do this. And for the entrepreneurs, they say, yep, we love it, and that's when they incorporate. So they don't have to figure it out in the first few years, which is expensive. They just run with it once they're ready. So I have a lot of fun with this job, and I really like this model, and I think a lot more people should be using it. So the first program that I started was a venture building program in Scotland called FAST. This was in partnership with the Roslin Institute, where Dolly the sheep was cloned, and the University of Edinburgh. And the goal was to create globally conscious bioeconomy startups based in Scotland. And we focused on 3 of these opportunity areas: regenerative agriculture, pollinator reinforcement, and controlled environments. And we built 2 companies successfully through this program in less than 18 months. These are the founders. They were either PhDs or had some technical experience working at other startups, but none of them had ever really been a founder of a startup or had entrepreneurial experience. Realizó Core Technologies is a company that focuses on the forestry and the reforestation industry. And what they're looking to do, and what they are doing, is finding mycorrhizal fungi that pair with trees to increase the growth rate, to increase carbon sequestration, reduce the risk of disease, and reduce the growth of weeds. And some of the research that they had identified in the initial process suggested trees could grow up to 3 times faster if you used the right mycorrhizal fungi, which is incredible. They ended up putting the academic that worked on that paper on their advisory board, and within 4 months of starting, they had tripled their value, and within 16 months, they've gone on to increase their value now 9-fold. So really quite impressive stuff for a fairly simple idea. The second company, Aquanzo, this was looking to tackle the lack of fish feeds for the aquaculture industry. All over the world, the aquaculture industry is either harvesting fish to grind them up, to feed them to other fish, or the industry has said, we shouldn't do this, let's feed them soy or insects, which is kind of crazy because fish don't eat soy, and they tend not to eat insects that well. They don't like them, they're not tasty. So the idea was, well, what if we just made marine ingredients that fish like in a sustainable way? And so now the company is farming zooplankton, which fish love, using agricultural waste on land. So you have fish feeds, marine ingredients, not sustainable alternatives, but sustainable marine ingredients with zero ocean, using something that we have a lot of, which is agricultural waste. And they've already demonstrated that their product has at least equivalence with the best thing on the market already, within just 8 months of incorporation. But of course, with 18 months of sort of pre-development process here. So we're really proud of these companies. They're fantastic founders, really great teams. We spent a lot of time with them, and we support those companies long term. Couldn't ask for better outcomes. The problem was with pollinator reinforcement. This was disappointing. And it wasn't because of a lack of a need. We need to have way more native pollinating species. But it was actually because the approaches that we developed, which looked either at assisted reproduction of bees that don't reproduce very well, or domestication of new pollinating species that could be grown and released, which were still native, but had sort of had their populations crash over the years. These looked like very promising approaches. We built a team. The problem was the bees that we were looking at wouldn't do very well in Scotland. It's really cold, it's really wet, and the winters tend to kill a lot of the insect population. And on top of this, you have crops that aren't really ideal for pollination in Scotland, so the market wasn't fantastic in the location where we had these partnerships. And also the facilities we needed were south of the border in England. So we had a Scottish program to work on tropical bees. It didn't make sense. And so I realized from this, you can't regenerate something that wasn't there in the first place. And actually, you have to do a lot of research about what's the local problem in the bioeconomy in that particular area that you want to solve, and is it also something that you can make a business around? So at this point, I started thinking, okay, we need to be more focused on problems in localities, and we need to come up with some system to figure that out before we create companies or even launch a program. So I heard about this concept from an amazing guy called Joe Brewer, who's building regenerative farms at landscape scales in Colombia. And he'd written a thesis about the survivors will be bioregional. And a bioregion is essentially a contiguous area characterized by similar geographies, ecologies, plants, animals, ecological niches, and there's about 188 of these around the world. On land, we call them biomes or ecozones, and they're similar to climate zones. And what I find particularly cool about a bioregional model is, even though bioregions are unique, they form categories that exist all around the world. And they have similar problems derived from similar ecology. And they also have similar agricultural practices that are constrained by what's going on in a bioregion. So if you can identify a problem in a bioregion, then you'll probably be able to make a business that works. And you could also scale that to other bioregions around the world, which would satisfy what venture capital wants, which is to invest in a globally scalable company. So I quite like the bioregional model. And I really like this country, Costa Rica, which has some of the widest biodiversity in the world. And I'd known Costa Rica, I'd been there a few times before, but in the pandemic I became a digital nomad and I went to Costa Rica, and I was thinking about this whilst I was there, and I came to learn about the 16 different bioregions it has, as well as its powerhouse agricultural capability where it exports 4,000 different products all around the world, but also has a very good record of biodiversity conservation and reforestation and good human resources and skills and universities. So I thought, I wonder if we could solve all of these problems that we had in Scotland and create a locally focused, globally minded venture builder in Costa Rica. So I initiated this process, which was to figure out who has done the work already, what policies exist, what are the Costa Ricans doing already, where they've said this is what we would like to do with a bioeconomy. I started to speak to different advisors and people that understood the space of business, conservation, agriculture, and biodiversity around the country. And I challenged them with this idea of, could we build these companies here that will then go overseas to expand to Colombia, to Mexico, to Brazil? And we talked about bioregional business and started to design potential opportunity areas. And from that, the TABI program was born, the Tropical Agriculture and Bioeconomy Initiative. We looked at the National Bioeconomy Strategy, where the government and academics had done a lot of that work already. And that inspired us to create these 5 different opportunity areas, which we're now running in Costa Rica in partnership with Earth University, CATIE, CINDE, which is the foreign investment group, with support from CR Biomed, a biotechnology and bioeconomy cluster in Costa Rica. And for these, we're looking at creating new crops and new crop traits for the 21st century bioeconomy. We're looking at adapting tropical farms to climate change. We want to create new technologies to create independence from hydrocarbons for certain materials in Costa Rica. We want to create new biomaterials for construction. And we're also looking at how we can execute uplift strategies and higher profitability for smallholder farmers with agroforestry, which investors tend to be fearful of at the moment, but we think has long-term potential. But what's most important about this structure is that we have a joint steering committee, which is tasked with creating private enterprise, but keeping it on track to deliver the national bioeconomy strategy. You want to have a combination of the policy being mobilized by private enterprise without losing track of that policy, but also without being too focused on it and not creating a viable business that can scale the solution around the world. And the way that the partners are organized sort of creates reciprocity and mutual benefit. So Fundación Cruza is a sponsoring partner, and they simply fund the program because to them they care about seeing the outcome of having a functional bioeconomy and engine of entrepreneurship in Costa Rica. The implementation partners are CATIE and Earth University. And these are research institutions that really know about the subjects, but as they're academically oriented, they tend not to make very good companies that scale super effectively. And so to them we say, we'll put founding analysts in your laboratories, use your facilities, they'll pay rent when they start to create the companies, and your academics will have exposure to an entrepreneurial environment that will inspire them to create their own companies, which we're already starting to see in Scotland. And we will also allow you to act as investor partners. So universities often have investment funds, and they're willing to put capital into the companies when it's come out of that system of a joint founding analyst advisor team. And then we have alliance partners, where we really like what they do. They can't invest and they can't sponsor, but they can grease the wheels and make the process smooth and easy. They have access to network. They have access to business contacts. And they want to provide support, usually because they'd be great board members on the company. And then finally, we have room for what we call strategic partners in any of these programs. So here the idea is we would find a corporation that has a problem already. They want to innovate in that problem, but it would be far too expensive for them to do it themselves. And they can hire their own internal teams and create million-dollar programs to innovate and really never get anywhere because it's sort of a bureaucratic, large organization. Or we can say, have a seat at our table, and let's co-design opportunity areas and companies together, which offer you the ability to create a new startup in an agile way that will solve your problem that you can invest in, and also you can be one of the first customers in the sense that you can buy the solution to the problem that you have. And so this is a really elegant system. I would love to see more people around the world using this. So let's talk about a little bit the opportunity for Argentina's bioeconomy. And I think it's really important to start with some questions. about what are your motivations? Why are you doing this? Why do you want to participate in a bioeconomy? What are you building? And why are you doing that? But also, how do you define success? Is it going to be the same as economies that have come before? Or is it going to be about something very different? Will you tell a new story with the bioeconomy? The other thing I think is useful to consider is when I started on this journey with corals, I was just like horrified. I watched that documentary and I cried because it was like, oh my God, this beautiful oceanic rainforest is done. My children will never see it. And I was motivated by fear and a decision to stop bad things from happening. But over the last few years, as I've been working on this, my attitude has changed because I've seen that we do actually have something to be positive about, which is that we can create a prosperous bioeconomy that has amazing impacts on the planet and on people together. And I want to share that vision with more and more people. And I hope that you guys, when you're building a bioeconomy, are doing it out of what can happen in the future rather than what you want to stop. And for me, it's about really building these, this network of global but local venture builders that understand each problem locally and can expand the solution overseas. And we've repositioned the Scottish program to be a temperate ecosystem venture builder rather than focused on Scotland. And so now we're thinking about what problems can exist in Canada, South Africa, New Zealand, etc. And Argentina, why not? And what I want to see happen next is to create these links between the two venture building programs of different partners, different universities, different experts, and different investment groups that sort of each have faith in this new design. So I think the opportunity for Argentina is really exciting. And a lot of that is based on the size and scale of your country. I've been working in Scotland and Costa Rica. These are very small places. But when I can't even count the number of biomes and bioregions that exist in this place. It's phenomenal. And you're absolutely a powerhouse of agriculture. So there's a lot that could be done. And I think rather than think about national venture builders representative of regions, maybe the right model to pursue in Argentina is that you would have a system of, or a network of local venture building systems, each one that understands what are the challenges in one region, and how do you connect up those challenges and solutions across the board for the entire country so that you're integrating solutions and new industries. And I was thinking about this in terms of like what the metrics could be. So in the old system, you think about, okay, we're number 2 in corn today. We want to be number 1. We're like 4th in dairy. Let's get to number 3 or 2. But why don't you just say, actually, these are already very good numbers. Let's elevate the sustainability and let's integrate these systems in a way that starts to make a little bit more sense. But that might actually mean that you need to sacrifice some productivity in some ways. And that's going to be hard to navigate. So, as an example, you're the number 1 producer of peanuts. Would it be okay to reduce the amount of yield of edible peanuts to enhance the production of shells so that then you could put those shells into a biochar processing system that created a natural fertilizer? And could you do this from Cordoba and then export that to Santa Fe? And then could you use that biochar to support the corn and the soy production, or reduce runoff, which enables an aquaculture system? Or maybe you're making something that's genetically modified that then allows you to create fire breaks or crops that can be useful as protection against wildfires. So thinking strategically about how you're going to shift these metrics around is an opportunity in front of you in Argentina, which I'd love to learn more about if you're doing that already. The other piece to consider is, in the bioeconomy, I've talked a lot about green biotech and red biotech, well, not red, but blue and yellow. Biotech is a big spectrum. There's a lot of things going on. How are you going to mobilize all of the actors towards the bioeconomy today? How will you motivate finance people, software development people, engineers to be part of this? Even the beer producers, that's one of the oldest biotechnologies. They have a stake in it too. So I want to leave you with some questions, which are, what are the areas of opportunity that you see in Argentina? What ecosystems, the local ones, do you want to defend more than anything personally that make you think this is what I want to do, I want to build a company for this? And how do you make that profitable for other ecosystemic challenges around the world? What services and abilities across the entire spectrum of the bioeconomy do you want to optimize in long-term training programs to involve more people in this field? When it comes to company development, are you innovating with 20th century models that are tired and not designed to build agile, multidisciplinary biotechnology or bioeconomy startups? Or are you going to create or adopt other methods that can move quickly to respond to that challenge? Where do you see these interregional opportunities within the country? And do you think a national system of incubators, accelerators, and universities and companies can be converted towards a more integrated vision which challenges existing metrics? And who are those actors? Who are the right ones to involve? But for me, I think one of the most important things to think about is this question. How do you break these human political barriers between cities and regions and existing institutions where there's a lot of politics, there's a lot of interactions, there's a lot of history, and overcoming that to create something new, I think is going to be one of the hardest things to do. And before I came to Argentina, I asked a few people who would be the right partners to involve in a framework like this. And these are some of the answers that I got back. So imagine, what would it look like if you had CAB saying, we want to create this bioeconomy and we're putting funds to create an entirely new model. And we're going to involve these companies which are already operating in the biotechnology and bioeconomy space who recognize challenges, and they're going to throw down these challenges and say, we'd like to get these solved and create more startups in the country. What universities and facilities and knowledge bases do you involve so that those entrepreneurs and scientists who are being trained to become entrepreneurs can be based there? And how much training can they get from investor partners? Right? How do you get all of these private finance groups and business people to train scientists to make that happen? And in terms of alliance partners, who can grease the wheels to make that happen? So I could be crazy. I don't know Argentina very well, but I'm sure just showing you this might articulate, this probably can't happen, and here's why. And I would challenge you to say, well, maybe address that issue to create this cool integrated vision that allows Argentina to have a bioeconomy that flourishes and becomes the leader in the world. So with that, I'll say thank you very much for your attention.